it's Amiiben. We're not even 2 episodes in and I've started a series, The Import Report, a show in which I look at multiple games from Japan with no language barrier. I'm gonna start with the Famicom. It seems like a good start. I've always liked the quirkiness of this console, but all that aside, let's take a look at our first game, Bird Week. Released in 1986, Bird Week was developed by Lennar, known for the infamous Deadly Towers, also for the Famicom/NES, and absolutely nothing else. So let's start. When you turn on the game, you are greeted by 2 options, Game Start and Study Game. Study Game is a practice mode with 1 level, so on to the main game. Your objective is to keep your baby birds alive by feeding them butterflies so they can go on to leave the nest. The game is vaguely similar to Defender, but with a nature theme. Now there are other animals trying to cross your path, and you must defeat them. You pick up a mushroom and drop it on their head, and somehow that stuns them. As the levels progress, you cycle through different environments. Spring, but it's a cherry blossom, and autumn. After autumn, there's actually a bonus round where you catch fish in the ocean with a lighthouse on the horizon. After that, our bird protagonist goes into a desert, and finally to the spring area, but this time with flowers. So it's a simple game, and it's definitely more fun than it looks. The difficulty curve is also steep. After the first level, it gets pretty challenging. That is emphasized by the different enemies. There's a big black hawk who is easy to dodge and is present in every environment. A squirrel that jumps and can kill a bird for some reason. Another squirrel, but this time it flies. And finally, a woodpecker. This guy is easily the most irritating obstacle. He flies faster than you and can seemingly appear out of nowhere. Also, I don't know why they named the game specifically Bird Week. Like, I understand the bird part, but why week? Maybe because it only took the developers a week to make the game. There's also no timekeeping system, and if there was, this would probably be like a year-round thing. But the title certainly is unique in that right. I applaud the devs on the controls. Navigating isn't like a spaceship in any other arcade-style game. The mama bird is always moving in one direction or the other. Gaining altitude is a lot slower, and you can make quick dives to pick up a mushroom or feed your kin. All of this combined makes it a more realistic experience. Also, the main theme, just like a real bird, is cute and charming at first, but starts hurting your ears after a little while. In all seriousness, Bird Week is a moderately challenging, good little Famicom game. 7 out of 10. The next game for today is Ninja Hattori-kun, also released in 1986. It's the 5th best-selling Famicom game in Japan, making it readily available and cheap. Unlike Bird Week, a well-known company made this one, Hudson Soft. This game is based on a very popular children's manga and anime of the same name, created by the legendary Fujiko Fujio. I definitely butchered that. Creators of Obake no Kyutaro, Kaibutsu-kun, and easily the most famous of them all, Doraemon. Some of you may recognize this character, but have never heard his name. Ninja Hattori was actually part of that terrible D-Say Dab meme from a while back. Remember that one? The Ninja Hattori franchise is not only popular in Japan, but caught on in India too. But this isn't Glass Reflection, so let's stop talking about anime and start up that game. Right off the bat, the visuals aren't really pushing the console, but not terrible. There is a constant onslaught of enemies waiting to kill you, including little ninja things that look like tack from the Kirby series. The first power-up most players encounter is the speed boost from this football player sorta enemy. Other enemies include a cloud ninja that throws shurikens at you, some running creature I can't identify, a ghost that gives you an utter death sentence, a bird that drops bombs, and finally a red cloud ninja that throws lightning at you. When hit, the lightning makes little ninja do a blackface? Hudson Soft, you can't do this. I mean, it's 86. Come on. And that's not it with the raunchy moves. At this house, you're supposed to receive a power-up. But instead, I got an item bag with a swastika on it? Oh my gosh, I know it's referring to Jainism's use. But it doesn't take away the fact that it shocked me. At the end of each level, you get to play a minigame where some sensei throws, socks? Fish? Yeah, that sort of looks like a fish. Let's go with fish. You try to collect as many fish as you can, which rewards you with more points. One of my major issues with this game are the jumps. They're like the jump mechanics from Mario Bros. Cranked up to 10. You can't control them midair whatsoever, and after you get to the peak of the jump, you come plummeting down. This really hinders the game and adds a whole new level of frustration to it. This game is extremely difficult. After taking a hit, there are no invincibility frames. Instead, you get stunned and have to endure this annoying screeching sound. And you'd better get used to that, because you get hit a lot. There's a difference between challenging game design and unfair game design. Ninja Hattori is the latter. Often, you get out of being stunned, you get hit again immediately after, with no chance of escape. But all criticisms aside, there is still enjoyment to be had from this cart. It's fun in short bursts, and the power-ups are exciting. The one song isn't that bad either, and it's fun trying to beat your previous hardest score. And for an average price of about $2, it certainly is a good addition to any collector's shelf, making my final rating a 5 out of 10. Tune in next time on the Import Report, where we play After a month, it is finally Gubble time. Now, I said earlier in my Too Many Games pickup video, it looks terrible. Actually, take that back. After briefly researching the game, Gubble doesn't look as bad as I thought. It's a puzzle game and it has a very unique premise. You pick up various tools and take apart 104 different stages. The game was developed by Actual Entertainment, and their motive was to make a non-violent, family-friendly game. Well, now the company is called Lazinger Entertainment, after Franz Lazinger, who was involved in making Crystal Castles, one of my favorite arcade games. Also, even though I have the PS1 version, and it being the most common, there's an HD version of Gubble for the PC, so let's review that one. I got this game from the Gubble website for only $5. The website looks very outdated. It may have been created in Web 1.0, that's kind of what it looks like, but they continue to provide new content. Fittingly, everything you wanted to know about this generally forgotten puzzle game is here. The Gubble News tab is also very interesting. It states that there will be a Steam release of this PC upscale and a full-on remake later this year. They also claim that Gubble 2 will get a remake as well, and the website will be updated. However, it's the middle of August, and so far none of this has happened. But with all this promise, let's see if Gubble lives up to the expectations. When you first boot up the game, you are greeted by a bad MIDI file that calls itself the main theme. Most of the soundtrack is bad. The instruments are low quality and the music is atonal and repetitive without a catchy melody. Simply put, it's really annoying. And this whole game is dated. I do like retro games, but some things don't age well, like Donkey Kong 64 and the first Fire Emblem game on the Famicom. Hopefully, in the supposed remake, they will update the assets and fix the gameplay, but they probably won't fix the music, because they call the composer legendary after working on one game. Yikes. There's actually a story to this game, but it's only referenced in the manual, not the game. Gubble D. Gleep is abducted by a UFO and was mistaken for a worker Gubble. Name your child after your race? Nice. He has to use various tools to unscrew and take apart these dangerous levels, called Zimbots, in order to get home safe. According to Gubble 2, he's a teenager. Essentially, the whole plot of Gubble is forced child labor, which is fun for the whole family if you ask me. So anyway, you start out in this semi-interactive level select with way too many save points. You have one objective in the game: destroy all the Zimbots. There are 10 worlds where Gubble has a whole arsenal of tools he can wield. such as a Phillips screwdriver, a hammer, a bolt remover, and many more, including a very annoying tall screwdriver. Why is it annoying, you may ask? So, basically, a main mechanic in the game is pressing the spacebar to hover over enemies while staying above the tool. But with the tall screwdriver, you can't just release space and get back on the tool. You have to go around, making you susceptible to taking damage. Although some bad guys can harm you even if you're hovering. With the tall screwdriver being much taller than Gubble's hover, you have to go around and get back on. Kind of a minor nitpick, but some levels are way harder than they need to be. On first impression, Gubble seems like an easygoing puzzle game that will be a breeze. The levels are simple and fun to complete on the first try, until the difficulty curve hits. And oh, it hits. Around the end of the second world, the game becomes more challenging. Actual entertainment could have eased into the difficulty, though after the first world, you get used to it. But from that point onward, Gubble is pretty much the same. Dodge enemies, pick up tools, unscrew the Zimbots, repeat. Only variation it has are the occasional bonus Zimbots, which is either a death run just for some lousy points, or a 20-second collectathon, also for points, but this one can give you health. Oh yeah, another annoying addition is that Gubble sounds like a minion, and unless you're a Facebook mom in her mid-40s, that's not really a good thing if you ask me. Gubble is just flat out annoying. You know what else is annoying? The bad game design in the later levels. It can be more challenging than it needs to be. Enemies can get stuck in places, making the level unbeatable, and screws can be placed so you don't have to take a hit. When they have this many levels, it feels like they didn't playtest them enough. And past World 7, it feels like a rage game. All these unfair mechanics and more are just a part of every level. And a lot of rage games are designed well. Take my favorite game of all time, V. It has great music, a fun story, and most importantly, fair difficulty. And you could say that about Cuphead as well. The levels may be challenging or even more challenging than Gubble, but if you die, it feels like your fault and your lower skill level, instead of a broken AI and bad levels. So, is Gubble worth the $5? Yes. Even though beyond World 7 it becomes a poor designed mess of a game, 70% of the game is pretty fun. Though I wouldn't recommend it for everybody. As I stated before, it's frustrating and isn't designed or programmed the best. I feel that some puzzle and arcade fans might find worth in this game. But will I review the second Gubble? No. This is Odd Arcade, the show in which we look at the weird corner of Maine. Are they hidden gems or better left forgotten? The first game we will be taking a look at today is Bongo. Bongo is made by Jetsoft, and you, yes you, are more well known than this British dev. In fact, with all my research, there's no known promotional art or cabinet for this game. Just the .zip file. Was this game ever released? We may never know. But let's find out what the game is like. You play as an unnamed adventurer and have to get through about 26 screens that progressively get more difficult. Well, there are actually only about 8 unique screens that repeat. The controls are simple and work well for the most part. It's possible that on the cabinet there were buttons instead of joystick, similar to Pac-Land or Missile Command. But it could have used a joystick because Jetsoft made another game called Cavalon, which used 4 directions and 2 buttons. So they could have reused parts. But like Bongo, we only have the .zip file for that game as well. Something you'll notice right off the bat is that the jumps in momentum are different from the standard platformer. Well, there actually is no momentum. You move at the same speed for the entire game, which is off-putting at first but easy to overcome. What isn't easy to overcome, though, is the hit detection on the platforms. If you grab the edge, you just fall right through. This can get very annoying, but why are you running? You're being chased by an unstoppable evil, a mad killing machine, a creature that knows only to kill. Beware, you are being chased by a dinosaur. Really, Jetsoft? That was the most menacing thing you could come up with? You may have noticed the bonus panel on the left side of the screen. If you collect 6 treasures without dying, you can advance a few screens. The difficulty is fair and steady, but gets really tough on the last couple of levels, especially 23. Level 23 is a culmination of all things bad about this game in one screen. Platformers are hard to land on and the timing is frame perfect. You can't take your time here because dinosaur. Though, you can turn on infinite lives in MAME, which I definitely did not do. So after that mess, you get to the final screen where you have to time a cage drop to catch that dinosaur. After all is said and done, the adventurer and some animals do a dinosaur enslavement dance before a new dino comes and chases you, repeating the game. Now this game is no Donkey Kong, but I still like it. Even though it can be tough, it'll only take you about 20 minutes to beat. And I recommend checking it out. The next platformer is 1983's Dr. Micro by Senritsu. Now, you may not have heard of this company, but you probably know their work. They're partners with Sega and help develop and publish a lot of their games, like the Outrun Genesis titles and even Tetris. Yes, the $1 million one. But this is one of their many original arcade titles, and it's pretty good. Unlike many arcade games, when you boot it up, there is no RAM or ROM check. It just has this nice intro, then it goes into a demo mode. You play as another unnamed protagonist, and you must stop Dr. Micro. Why? Who knows? There are 3 screens, and right off the bat, this game is obviously inspired by the Donkey Kong series. Your momentum and physics feel like Donkey Kong Jr.'s, and you have to kill pests with a gun, like Stanley from Donkey Kong 3. The first screen is not that challenging. All you have to do is make it from one side to the other, and the enemies aren't much of a threat, and take 1 hit. For extra points, you can hit the flask to slow the flow of evil liquid. Then, once you make it to the end, you stop the tomato juice and inject some green sauce. The next stage is quite possibly the worst this game has to offer. There are evil red spheres that detach their hands in order to kill you, and Dr. Micro sends other red blobs down to do the same thing. Kill you! Also, there's fans. Those are the bad part. Now, why are the fans terrible? Because they don't work. Pressing the up or down direction near a fan makes you go faster than pressing in the wind direction. To move on from the stage, you must kill a certain amount of enemies and then a gate opens. But that does not stay for long. So, if you're at the bottom of the stage and the gate opens, you're not making it out. The last stage is definitely the most fun of the 3. The ground platforms are all conveyor belts that bear resemblance to Stage 3 of Donkey Kong Jr. You start by jumping over cinder blocks and avoiding mechanical arms. On the second floor, it's pretty much the same, but you're willing to take the risk, and there are radios and other gadgets that are worth a lot of points. You are reunited with your gun and must shoot down objects on the assembly line while avoiding fire. The elevators can be finicky at times. They can switch directions, resulting in unfair deaths. You complete the 4th floor by avoiding evil circles. Then, shoot down a couple of robots and kick Dr. Micro. Don't kill him, just mildly inconvenience him by sending him down a couple floors so that the game can restart. And when it restarts, it will be at a higher difficulty. And, on level 3, the conveyor belts change a little bit. Neat. Overall, this game is fun but kind of lacking something. There could have been another level added or more polish to the whole game. It's better than most Donkey Kong clones of the era, but cannot compare to it. Also, like most arcade games, it has stolen music. This example being the main theme from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. And that's the only song in the game. Someone liked Dr. Micro enough to write a story about it for the No Sleep podcast, though. Overall, Dr. Micro's a fun little time waster. In the next episode of Odd Arcade, we'll take a look at some strange early SNK titles. But for now, have a good night. Welcome back to the Import Report, the show in which we look at relatively decent games we Americans never got. The first game for today is Mobile Suit Z Gundam Hot Scramble. Now, I've never watched an episode of Gundam in my life, and I don't plan on it, so keep that in mind. Does that stop me from liking the game? Absolutely not. This game is great. But first, some history. This game was released in 1986 in Japan, and was published by Bandai and developed by the company Game Studio. Talk about a terrible name. They didn't really develop anything you would know. The game greets you with a large wall of text that only a solid 3 people care about. It then spends 2 minutes of your time showing you a bunch of sprites of other robots. This is one of the longest intros on a Famicom game that is completely unnecessary. Though, 98% of the time, you just mash start. Right off the bat, this game is certainly graphically impressive, and gives off some 3D World Runner vibes. You have to fire at incoming robots and shoot down their bullets. These physics feel kind of wacky on these Earth segments, because you can only move so far up or down. And if you let go, it recenters. In later Earth segments, some mobile suits just pop out of nowhere and shoot you without any time to react. Thankfully, this doesn't last long, as the next segment takes place in space and has even better controls. It is easier to get hit in the space segments, though. After you shoot even more robots, you infiltrate a ship. Some ships you have to shoot down before entering, which is almost impossible to do without taking a hit. The game switches genres and becomes a 2D side-scrolling dungeon crawler sort of thing. These levels are my favorite in the whole game. I don't believe they're randomly generated, but they never get old. The goal in these levels is to make it to the end and destroy this thing. I can't really tell what it is. Along the way, you guessed it, more killer robots. You can also find power-ups, including the power rifle, the power shield, and randomly generated health. The gun upgrade lets your bullets pass through bots, and the shield temporarily protects you from damage. Pretty simple stuff, but sometimes when I pick up a health rectangle, I either heal half a point or get a max recovery. In these segments, if you hold the jump button, you can transform into a wave rider and fly faster. You can't stop though and can't change fire directions, and you are more vulnerable to damage. After you complete the maze, you face a giant reactor thing. The weak point is obvious, and once you shoot it, it fires in multiple directions. At first, it's really hard to avoid the bullets, but after playing a couple times, you make the habit of the direction combination, and they become easy to avoid. And in the later levels, there are some platforms that make it even easier to dodge the bullets, requiring you to only jump sometimes. The game has 16 unique levels, which change up the dungeons a little bit and add harder robots. And the first-person shooter segments just add more enemies. After you beat level 16, the credits show with some unidentified child chasing a bouncing ball. Even though this game sounds like something I'd order for breakfast, it's one of my favorite Famicom games. The first-person segments are really fun and impressive for the console. The 2D section is addicting and is all around an original Famicom game. There are actually 2 versions, the one I reviewed and the extremely rare Director's Cut. That game is an entirely first-person shooter and is one of the rarest games of all time. Only 1,000 were made. On the topic of rare, there's actually a GBA port for the Famicom miniseries. Well, not really. If you bought Mobile Suit Gundam Warriors of Locust for the Japanese GameCube, you could enter a contest to win one of these gems. This time, only 2,000 were made, making it one of the rarest GBA games. The next game for today is Nuts and Milk by Hudson Soft. This was the first ever third-party game to be released on a Nintendo console. Now, if it wasn't for this, we probably wouldn't have such classics like Redneck Jamboree and Touch Deek. So yeah, this game was originally released on a couple of Japanese computers before being ported to the Famicom the following year. The game's menu looks like a copy and paste from all Nintendo arcade ports. In fact, this whole game doesn't even feel third-party. Hudson really outdid themselves by capturing the Nintendo arcade aesthetic. From a distance, the card even looks like it could be a Famicom Pulse title, specifically Donkey Kong Jr. Math, and it even has a simple story. You play as Milk, a blob-like thing, and once you've collected all the fruit, you try not to get murdered by nuts. And then you get to meet your girlfriend named Yogurt. On many levels, there are multiple nuts. Are they clones or are they a species? That doesn't really matter though. This game is pure arcade fun. There are 50 unique levels and are all crafted quite nicely. I'm not going to cover all of them, but I'll show a few more noteworthy ones. Round 6 says nuts and round 7 says milk to remind you of what game you're playing. Level 9 has this tricky spring segment and is the only real difficulty spike in the game. There are 2 springs and timing on those is really tight. And then, after that, you must climb this staircase-like structure that is really easy to get stuck on. Maybe the devs thought of this level as an ending point of the easy stages, because from this point onward, the stages get a lot more challenging, but not too challenging. Round 14 says Kiku, which means listen in Japanese. But why should I be listening? Level 24 is interesting because if you miss these jumps, you don't fall into a pit. You have to run into one of the many nuts to end it yourself, making the death stick with you more. That's brutal. There's also an array of bonus stages. Pretty standard, but they literally just control-seed the fireballs from Mario Bros. But let's say you played all the levels multiple times and need something fresh. There's actually a level editor where you can make your own custom nuts and milk stages. I made Donkey Kong and the game said no. No, seriously. Every time I tried to make something, I always got a round error. And it's not just an emulation problem because I painstakingly recreated my stages on my Famicom and still got the same problem. I don't believe I have a bootleg cart because I got this game from the Pink Gorilla. But I'm not really a level editor guy myself, so I'm not that disappointed. So overall, this game is really good. It manages to pull off the inspired by aesthetic well, and doesn't feel like a Donkey Kong ripoff, but rather an official Nintendo game. I really don't have too much to say about this one, it's just a generally good Famicom game. In the next episode of the Import Report, we will take a look at a couple of Mario SNES games we never got. But for now, have a good night. Quick preface, this was actually the first script I ever wrote for Amiiben, and it is about 4 months old at this point, thus it being a different format from my videos now. But all that aside, enjoy. So the other day I was at Walmart looking at some games. There were some good games from a few years back, and a lot of puzzlers and hidden image shovelware, with a whole row of Sims expansion packs. And I'd never actually seen this PC section before, as I kind of only look at the Nintendo stuff. I was just glancing through some shovelware, and then I saw it, Atari Vault. It boasted that it had 100 arcade and Atari 2600 classics, and was priced only at $9.88. So I picked it up. When I put the disc in my computer, I found out that its only purpose was to redirect me to the Steam product activation page. And inside the case was a product code. This bummed me out because I assumed I was getting a physical copy. But enough talk. Let's see what the game is like. First of all, they have the menus spot on. The grid and the music are accurate to the era, and on the topic of menus, they are very clean and organized. Everything is easy to find, and that should be expected. Although it's low resolution, the 3D models of the arcade machines and boxes are very nice. It was a good decision to include the manuals, but they are a little bit blurry. There's also a category list for the games, mainly for sorting the 2600 games because there are only 18 arcade titles. So I'll begin by reviewing all the arcade titles and then just pick out a few of my favorites or the most noteworthy ones of the 2600 selection. The first arcade game is Asteroids. I've never been very good at this one, but in this collection, hyperspace and thrust are mapped to the up and down buttons. Luckily, you can remap them. There's not much else to say here. Most everybody is familiar with Asteroids. A lot of people still like this game, but I could never get into it. Then there's Asteroids Deluxe. It's the same game, but with better graphics, physics, and a higher pitched sound. Next is Black Widow. Now, I've never heard of this one before, and that's strange because I'm a big twin-stick shooter fan. You play as a spider who must defend itself by shooting other bugs and collect money dropped by the insects. The graphics are quite nice and detailed for the era. It even has a difficulty selection screen. Not really though, it just puts you at different levels. Overall, this one holds up. Next is Centipede, the classic trackball game, and as you would expect, it's not the same as the arcade version. With the controller, it's not as precise, and it's way too sensitive. Using a mouse was better, but my laptop trackpad worked the best. But nothing tops the original controller. Overall, Centipede, in my opinion, has aged quite well for an arcade game. Next is Crystal Castles. I really like this one because it's actually at a pizza shop near me, and I play it a lot because I like pizza. Now, I may have a bit of a bias towards this one, but I really like this game. This game is similar to Pac-Mania because you collect items and jump to avoid enemies on an isometric field. But this came 5 years earlier, and instead of Pac-Man, you play as the long-forgotten Bentley Bear. You get bonus points for collecting the last gem, and also, the sound is pretty great, but partially stolen. The level complete theme is the famous theme from the Nutcracker. It's challenging to say the least. Next is Gravatar. Now there is bound to be somebody mad at me for saying this, but I just don't like this one. Why? Physics. I don't like the way it controls, and the gravity gimmick is just kinda off. Maybe I'm just bad, who knows. Next. Atari Force Liberator has this really long and terrible intro story. The model of this pseudo-Earth looks nice and is very smooth. The gameplay is sort of a mix between the Star Wars arcade game and Missile Command, which were actually both made by Atari. You have to liberate the planets and try to not get your ships destroyed. It's kind of stressful keeping track of 4 corners at once. Overall, it's decent. Major Havoc. This one was surprising to me. It's very graphically impressive for an 80s vector game, and the music is pretty good. It has 2 types of gameplay, space shooter and platformer. Platformer is actually rather easy. All you have to do is get rid of a handful of enemies, and their bullets are pretty easy to dodge. The platformer is fun. You have time in the form of an oxygen gauge, and must touch a reactor to destroy a ship. Touching the reactor adds another timer before the detonation. This game actually kind of reminds me of the last game I reviewed, Hot Scramble. This one's very fun and has a lot of depth for an arcade game. Millipede, the sequel to Centipede. Like most arcade sequels, not much is different, but in my opinion, it's not nearly as good. Missile Command. Now to be honest, I kind of always hated this game. Replaying it, it seems better than I always think, but like most arcade games, the sound's annoying and I just hate having limited ammo. Pong. The all-time classic, and one of the first, but not actually the first. Today, though, no matter how much of a classic it is, it doesn't really hold up. And coupled with the fact that there are no analog paddles on a computer, it's barely playable. Next. Red Baron. This one's fun at first, but gets boring quickly. You shoot planes and blimps. That's it. Space Duel. The most fun of the Asteroids games. For single player, the mode is nothing special, just asteroids with another coat of paint. But second mode is very unique, and I figure the 2-player modes are alright as well. But I really didn't have anybody try these out. It's fun, and the transfer mechanic is really unique. You control the red ship with the regular asteroids physics, and also have a green ship connected. It's fun trying to angle them right and firing. Sprint 2! Ugh, this one's just bad. The controls are stiff and clunky, the physics are terrible, and you're always getting run over and have to hear this annoying screeching sound. It sucks. Super Breakout. This game's always a blast. This is my favorite of the games in the 70s in this collection, and its simplicity makes it infinitely replayable. This game inspired the Arkanoid series, which I like quite a bit. But once you've played Arkanoid, it's harder to come back to the old Breakout games. Tempest, a very unique hit of the 80s. You play as what I think is a space croissant, and have to shoot alien bugs. This pioneered the tube shooter genre, and it's pretty good. It produced a trio of sequels, including Tempest 3000 for the new one. Never heard of a new one? I don't blame ya. Next is Warlords. If there's one game that can't be replicated at home, it is this one. Now don't get me wrong, it's a great game, but with no dial controls, no 3D backgrounds, it's pretty mediocre. In this medieval themed game, you bounce a fireball or two and just try to destroy enemy castles. This game is phenomenal on the arcades, but here it's a bust. Overall, the arcade portion on this disc is well worth the $10. All the games are fun with a few exceptions here and there, and the emulation for the most part is spot on, and I don't know about you, but I like the bezels. But that's not the main event. There are 82 Atari 2600 carts, and I don't know about you, but honestly, the majority of Atari games don't really hold up today. Things like Video Checkers and TV Casino, which were neat in the past, really have no substance today. And the bad home conversions and misleading box art caused the video game Crash 83. But you know this. On the bright side, Codemystics have streamlined the game selecting options. So instead of looking at the manual and lining up switches, the options are just on the menu. I found roughly a fourth of the games interesting and fun. Game number 4, Air-Sea Battle. Pretty fun game with multiple modes. You only have 3 angles of fire, but if you get the timing down, you won't even need them. Each mode is pretty similar. Game number 8, Basketball. This game's a lot of fun, and I hate basketball, so that's really saying something. Even though there are only 2 players, its oversimplicity and wacky physics make it a good time, especially with a friend. Game number 10, Bowling. This one's okay for 2 minutes until you find the pattern to get a strike every time. Next. Game number 17, Circus Atari. This one's similar to Breakout, but instead of breaking a wall, you pop balloons and have to bounce 2 performers. This game's actually a knockoff of Circus by Exidy. But like Oreo and Hydrox, the knockoff did it better. Game number 22, Demons to Diamonds. What is up with that name? Pretty typical shooting range type of game. Sort of fun, I guess. It gets pretty brutal when the screen fills with skulls that are firing at you, though. Game number 26, Fatal Run. Released late for the Atari 2600, it's just a poor man's pole position. The graphics and sound are nice for Atari, though. Game 34, Human Cannonball. Box art's the only good part. 41, Off the Wall. It's yet another Breakout clone, but with a Chinese theme. It's about as fun as you would expect. It's not good. Radar Lock. It's an entertaining game for the most part. Regular fighter jet shenanigans. Avoid planes, then shoot them. Pretty basic. Game 52. Real sports tennis, as opposed to fake non-sports tennis. The only game in the Real Sports Atari series I found enjoyable. The bouncing ball and shadow are impressive for Atari standards. It's just a simple tennis game that's fun. Game number 55, Save Mary. It was an unreleased prototype from 1990. Okay, you know why it wasn't released. But it's a shame because it's unique and fun. You stack boxes and try to rescue Mary from the bottom of a quarry. It's a nifty little strategy game. My only question is how the hell did Mary get to the bottom of this quarry? Was she walking along the quarry and just somehow floated to the bottom? I mean, she's not hurt. Never mind, that was stupid. Game number 56, Secret Quest. Proudly stated on the box that it was created by Nolan Bushnell. This is just a space-themed Zelda clone. With its droning theme and repetitive one-enemy rooms, it's interesting, but lackluster. Game number 64, Starship. This game took me by surprise, though there should be an epilepsy warning. It's a first-person space shooter, and you fire at random space shapes. It's more fun than it looks. But it also comes with two other great games. First of the two is Warp Drive, which is an obstacle dodger in the same first-person perspective. You can also control your speed as well. The second is Lunar Lander. Same name, but different games. You also dodge stuff in this one. But it's 2D. Excellent inclusion. Game number 67 is Street Racer, and is yet another dodging obstacle game. But this game has a lot of variation. All the modes are similar, you pretty much just dodge cars. In Slalom, you go through gates. In Dodge 'em, you dodge 'em. In Jet Shooter, my personal favorite, you go through 99 planes before the CPU or other person does. Finally, in Number Crunchers, you run into numbers, and that's it. This whole package is decent. Game 71, Super Breakout. While Breakout is on this collection, I skipped it because this one is vastly superior. This game is actually even better than the arcade version. It has the arcade's cavity, double, and progressive modes, and adds the original Breakout and children's mode. This doesn't really make any sense, since Atari's demographic was indeed children. Another advantage it had over the arcade version is the physics are more realistic and the controls are overall better. Game 73, Surround. This game is a mix of Snake and Kicks, though it predated both. The longer the game goes, the faster the blocks move. And as the title implies, a good strategy is to surround the other player. There's actually a version of this game on the Intellivision called Snafu, which is a great name, by the way. The other mode on this cart is Video Graffiti. It's a very primitive drawing app. The Sword Quest series was also an interesting inclusion. However, with no active contest, there really is no replay value. Sadly, Air World is still just Air. It's neat that they included the comics in the manual section, though. Overall, Atari Vault is a solid game compilation. The arcade section really hit it out of the park, and though I didn't find many of the 2600 games that entertaining, Atari was before my time, so I can't really relate to it. I bet people who grew up with it would get even more enjoyment out of this collection. Still, I had a great time going through all the games and seeing what was in store, and for $10 on Steam, and even less at Walmart, it's a really great value. I would recommend this to any fan of retro games. Hello there, it's Amiiben, and Merry Christmas to all. Christmas Carols by Bill Pogue. This game is really intense. The main character is trapped in an endless black void created by the evil genius Bill Pogue. There's no escape. The only thing the unnamed creature can do is listen to 22 one-channel monotonal Christmas songs for the rest of eternity. The only other character is a mute Christmas tree made out of hearts of those who died in this cursed realm. I usually don't get scared from games, but this game had me not sleeping for at least 3 days. Okay, I lied. This is just a demo that plays Christmas music. Back in 1984, this would have been almost cool running on like the old Tandy or something. Like most of these games and software I'll be covering today, this has pretty much no information about it. By now, the novelty of this is completely gone, but I included it on the list because it's pretty campy and feels like a passion project of Bill's. I think this game was made because he wanted to do it, and has sort of a wholesomeness to it. At first glance, it seems like a laughingstock of a DOS program, but over time, it captures the Christmas spirit. Crazy Christmas with a K. This is a kid's coloring book game for MS-DOS. The manual says, children from ages 3 to 9 can enjoy this Christmas season by decorating a tree and filling in any of the 9 different Christmas faces included in this program. They will have hours of holiday fun using Christmas images, shapes, letters, a painter's palette, and the facial features to complete the faces and the Christmas tree. Progressive Products isn't wrong except for the hours of fun part. Even though I'm 13, the most I could squeeze out of this game was like maybe 30 minutes. The templates include Frosty, Santa, Reindeer, Old Lady, Alien. Everybody knows the Christmas Martian, right? I was surprised that there weren't any sound effects in this program. Whenever I think of kids' computer games, I think of Kid Pix, and that game is full of sound effects. This game also teaches kids that Canon and Minuet and G are Christmas songs. So you might be asking, how the hell did you get 30 minutes out of this game? Well, I tried to make the dumbest looking creatures out of these presets. Ho, ho, ho! This little family game was released in 1985 by Random House. Yes, Random House, one of the most popular book publishers. It was put on a disc that contained the Apple II version on side A and a Commodore 64 version on side B. I actually would have preferred to review the Commodore version because the hardware is superior, especially the sound chip, but I couldn't find a working copy online. I'm also ashamed to say that this is my first Apple II game I've played. Yeah, I'm a Windows guy. Sorry, 0.9% of my audience. But before you unsubscribe, I gotta say, this game is pretty good. I had low expectations. All the Christmas games so far were pretty much garbage. And Ho 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 was advertised as a family game and published by a book company. I also had a little bit of trouble setting up the emulator and control settings, but this game completely changed my mind. After you boot up, you're greeted with 5 mini-games and a Mega Man-esque select screen. You have Santa's Reindeer game, Cinder's Cookie game, In the Gift Factory, Like the Christmas Tree, and Santa's Big Show, and then finally, the Complete game. The Complete game, which is kind of like the All Cup Tour from Double Dash. It's a mix of all of the games. All of these mini-games, except Light the Christmas Tree, require you to do something 5 times. Also, in the Complete game, you only have to complete 1 round of each game, as opposed to 3 rounds when you select them individually. You can pick between 2 difficulty options, Elf and Gnome, which have 2 drastic differences. The first difference is that gnomes aren't Christmassy, and the second is that you can get through Elf in 5 to 10 minutes on your first try, but Gnome takes like at least 2 hours of trial and error before mastering. I do believe Gnome is more fun than Elf, and is the superior mode, but there could have been a medium mode to ease into the great difficulty spike. Maybe something like Snowman. In the first game, you control a Santa head and try to surround a reindeer with footprints. This game was definitely inspired by arcade hits like Tron and Kix. The reindeer do have a mind of their own, though. Sometimes they'll just hang out around an obstacle, making it impossible for you to capture them unless they move, which can take a while. You also have a slide move that you activate by pressing fire or stepping on these dark blue spots. This will make you go fast at the expense of your control over Santa. The next game is probably my favorite of the bunch, Cinder's Cookie game. You control a little elf who has an icing tool and a spatula. He has to ice and scoop 5 dozen cookies for Cinda. There are also these stretchy hands that steal cookies and will shake you if you run into them. In gnome mode, icing and serving cookies won't get you anywhere. If you run into one of the arms, they'll let go of a ton of cookies. Apparently, Cinda is Mrs. Claus. Wow, David Schroeder had the snowballs to give Mrs. Claus a name. Well, in the next game, you can play as her. This game involves Santa and Cinda working in tandem to sort presents. They use stretchy boots to kick them in bins. Why does the programmer like stretchy limbs so much? There are also helicopters and ships that block your boots. As fun as they are to hit, you shouldn't, because they give you a big time deduction. This is probably the easiest game in the set, believe it or not. I find myself coming back to this one the least. I beat it on Gnome first try, and after a while, I was able to complete the game without hitting any obstacles. There really isn't too much to say about this one. It's not terrible, but just not that challenging. In the next game, like the Christmas tree, Cinda is the main character. The game goes against the norm and only has one round. You have to completely illuminate the Christmas tree with light from the stars. You can also set traps for said stars, and when they fall into these traps, a burst of light shoots out, which saves you a lot of time. When I played this one, I immediately thought of a little game called Crush Roller. It was one of many Pac-Man inspired games of the 80s. Out of all the games, I feel that this one has the best difficulty balance. The jump from elf to gnome is the smoothest. The last game on Ho 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 is Santa's Big Show. Set down your controller because this one only uses keys 1 through 4. This is a quick reaction game where you control some cameras and try to get 5 shots of Santa's face. I've always been a fan of reflex-based games and threw a ton of yen into the QTE machines at Shenmue. And so, I like this one. Even though it's by far the simplest game of the bunch, it's kind of fun. Once you get all 5 shots, it does this really cool and impressive instant replay feature. Back in the 80s, this was very uncommon, and the only notable game with an instant replay that comes to mind is Food Fight, and that was in the arcade. If you beat Santa's Big Show in the complete game, you are rewarded with some nice Christmas music. And it's worse than Christmas carols on DOS. I bet if I got the Commodore version to work, it would sound better with that awesome SID chip. What sets Ho 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 apart from the throwaway minigame compilations is the amount of polish on this game. All of the games are solid and fine-tuned, with little amounts of unfairness or BS. The game pulls off the aspect of a fair challenge, which is difficult for most games. When you lose in these minigames, it feels like your fault, most of the time, and not stupid mechanics. I also really like how each game has its own logo that it displays on the title screen and corner. Frosty the Snowman on the Commodore. Snowmen are probably one of my favorite characters. I really don't know why. I just like them. Maybe because I always watched the 1984 movie The Snowman when I was little. That was one of my favorite Christmas movies. I always wished I could walk in the air. That movie has a game too, but it's way too bad to review. Anyways, I'm getting off topic, so why don't we just start the game already? As soon as it boots, there aren't any menus or anything. You're just rushed right into the game. It's meant to be 2 players, but works fine with just 1. The Frosty you know and love has purple arms now and has to run away from Santa. This game isn't great. For starters, you can't control your jumps mid-air. Think Castlevania, but taken to the extreme. And the jumps have to be pixel perfect. And there's no room for error in any of these. It's constant trial and error and infinite frustration. And the lives make it even worse. Why even have them? Every time you die, Frosty is sent back to the beginning, so lives are completely useless. And that really ruins the game for me. Every time you make a dumb mistake, you have to start all the way over, which is just bad game design. And the constant resetting because you ran out of lives is also pretty terrible. The game felt like it had so much potential, but all went down the drain. This one does have a saving grace though. The music. Whoever programmed this doesn't know how to make a video game, but is a master of the said chip. They made a great arrangement of Frosty the Snowman, using many distinct instruments and discernible sections. This game had a lot of potential, but it all just kind of went away because of a few fatal flaws. But in 2008, homebrewer Beyond Reproach took this game and fixed it. The graphics got a complete overhaul and look so much nicer. The parallax snow, the better running animations, the color shading, and the witty level names. And the game looked so beautiful on the Commodore. And hey, the menu theme is the song from the Snowman. I don't know why it's here, but I'm not complaining. I only have one gripe though. They replaced the in-game music with nobody's favorite Christmas song, Do They Know It's Christmas, by Band-Aid. There's a menu now that has the one option that the original desperately needed. Restart points. This feature alone saves the game, and actually gives a purpose to your life and the lives in the game. He also fixes the jumps and took out the stupid specific platforming challenges. Overall, the original game's a nightmare you shouldn't play, but the homebrew sequel is worth a try. Santa's Xmas Caper. There are actually two versions of this game. The one I'll be reviewing, the platformer for DOS and Amiga, and a space shooter that came out for the Amstrad CPC, Commodore 64, and the ZX Spectrum. This game came out in the early 90s and only in the UK by the company Zeppelin. Zeppelin eventually changed their name to Eutechnics and went on to create the masterpiece, Ride to Hell Retribution, the definitive gaming experience. I find it very weird that a studio that made this released a game with the same name across multiple platforms, but two of them are a completely different genre of game. It's really strange. But that doesn't matter. Is the platformer good? Yes. It's a collectathon, which is pretty refreshing after all of these mostly bland Christmas games. It's not a very open world, but you will definitely do some exploring. Collecting the presents is fun and satisfying, along with freezing the enemies. Yes, that's right. You can't actually kill these guys. Just stun them. There's an issue you might have noticed from the footage, though. The camera. If you ever played Super Mario Bros. Deluxe, you know what this is like. There are times when you are forced to take a leap of faith, and that's a platforming crime. One other thing to mention are these weird enemies. There's a bootleg Grimace, Turkey Helicopter, and a cameo from Tux, the Linux Penguin. Everyone is here! I don't have anything else to say about this game. Why? Because it's probably the shortest game I've ever played. Seriously, on a good day, you can get through the entire thing in about 20 minutes. And you know, that's what a Christmas game should be. A short, non-frustrating game that you can play in one sitting for the season. As you might know, the game was bundled with a mouse that supported over 70 games like Super Solitaire and that Doom port we hate. This wasn't the only mouse Nintendo made, though. Exclusive to Japan, Slide Adventure Match Kid was a DS game that used a mouse-like accessory. At first glance, you'll notice that it's a trackball mouse and is not as responsive as the optical mice we're all used to. The well-known retro hardware company Hyperkin did make an optical mouse, though, which is much more ergonomic and the best way to play the game. Though, if you want to go the emulation route, granted you own the game and a SNES and a drawing pad, you can play Mario Paint with the best control possible and make amazing art. Though, if you're one of the people who bought a Wacom, you probably have Photoshop, and this is nothing more than a novelty at best. Psycho Fox. This game has an interesting but very confusing history. In 1988, Vic Tokai released Kakefu Kimi no Jump Tengoku on the Famicom, which starred a famous Japanese child actor as the main character. 1 year later, Psycho Fox came out in North America and Europe, but not Japan. These two games are very similar design-wise, sharing many elements, such as this creature you can use as a weapon. Kakeifu Kimi no Jump Tengoku was released in North America a year later as Kid Cool. Finally, in 1991, Decap Attack was released, which is said to be a spiritual successor to Psycho Fox on the Sega Genesis. So what does that make Psycho Fox? In North America, it's the prequel to Kid Cool, but globally speaking, it could be a reboot of Kid Cool? And then Decap Attack is the spiritual successor to Psycho Fox, but it's also technically the spiritual successor to Kid Cool? Doom on the SNES has no right to exist. Every other console port of Doom is on at least a 32-bit system, and there was only one other M-rated SNES game, Mortal Kombat 3. But if you count Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 as a separate game, then technically there's two. And it even comes in a red cartridge. It's also terrible. The screen is very tiny and blurry. You literally can't see very far ahead of you. Enemies in the distance are 3 twitching pixels. No, I'm not lying. And when you're moving, there is no way to tell if an enemy is present if it isn't more than a yard away from you. I could mistake a screenshot from this game as pebbles in mud. It looks that bad. Of course, that's not the only issue. The input delay is unbearable. Controlling Doomguy is like trying to swim only using your left arm. Annoying, slow, and you'll probably drown. The enemies attack faster than you would expect, making the game more frustrating. You can also use the SNES mouse, but that doesn't really fix any of the previous issues. I guess the only positive aspect of this game is the music. It's leagues better than the 32X port. Even though it's quite impressive how they went out of their way to make a new engine for the SNES and utilize the Super Effects chip, the Super Nintendo was never really meant to play Doom. The only reason Williams ported this game to the SNES, because Doom was popular and they could probably make a quick buck. Don't let the unique red cartridge fool you. This game is not worth picking up, unless you're a diehard Doom fan or collecting a complete SNES set. There really isn't that much else to say. SNES Doom is just a bad game, not because of the developer's lack of effort, but because of the Super Nintendo's hardware restrictions.